Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a free 30-day trial when you visit audibletrial.com/teacherrecharge. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. When you do that, not only do you support Audible, but you also support this podcast, which I surely do appreciate because I'm Fred Kepp. I'm the host of the Teacher Recharge podcast. And yes, it has been extremely cold this last week, but this episode is going to warm you up for the week ahead. Let's get it started.
Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Oh, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up.
Hello to all my teachers out there. Welcome to another edition of the Teacher Recharge podcast. I'm your host, Fred Kepp. I would love to share a little story with you from this last week with a couple of my students. So a couple of my soccer boys are also doing wrestling in the spring. So right now they're doing wrestling, and I have never been to a wrestling match before because it's not really a thing in Odessa, Texas. I don't believe my high school even had a wrestling team, at least when I was there. So this was literally my first experience ever with wrestling. I had to Google the rules. I had to YouTube the rules. I was just like straight up newbie status. And I go to this thing, and these are, grown high schoolers, so pretty much grown men and women, and they're like flipping throwing each other and like body slamming each other. Like I was like laughing because I was in shock. I was in disbelief. It was such a crazy sport. I mean, the amount of thought that has to go into it, and then the amount of strength. I mean, I thought soccer players, I thought my boys were tough because of the stuff I put them through. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine being a wrestler. That is just intense. Oh my goodness, what an experience. If you've never been to a wrestling match, I would highly recommend it. Shout out to all the wrestling coaches and all the wrestlers out there listening today. But wow, what an experience. Also, I just kind of wanted to touch on that stuff that's going on in Los Angeles right now. Now, I don't have too much of a perspective on it because obviously I grew up in Texas. I live in Wichita, Kansas. So I've never even been to LA, but hopefully my goal is by next week I would like to bring a guest on from LA. So if you know anybody, I would love to hear from you. teacherrechargepodcast@gmail.com. I'll be doing my own research and hopefully be able to reach out to a couple teachers and get someone on the show for next week to kind of give us a perspective on that and just kind of tell us how they're still getting through the week and fighting for their students. So without further ado, we got an amazing episode today with a freshman, a newbie in the schooling world, I guess. Her name is Brooke Frisch. She teaches at a place called Thales Academy, and she was born and raised here in Kansas. Thales Academy, I believe, is in North Carolina. She is a Latin teacher at this private classical school. She's going to tell us all about that life and talk about her fresh perspective on the teaching world. So enjoy this episode. It was a very good one with one of my very, very good friends. Enjoy. All right, everyone, welcome to another edition of the Teacher Recharge podcast. Today, I have a wonderful, amazing, awesome, perfect, great, awesome. Well, probably not perfect, but nobody's perfect. That's totally fine. I can't say enough positive things about this individual, though. She is an extremely good friend of mine. Her name is Brooke Frisch. She is in town for Christmas break, which is when we're recording this, from North Carolina. She is a teacher at a private school there called Thales Academy. So, first of all, how in the heck are you?
I'm doing great.
Yes, that's awesome. It's so good to have you here on a freaking cold December day. But, this episode is going to warm everyone's heart. So that's what really matters. Anyways, tell us a little bit about Thales. What is it all about? Why is it even in existence?
Why is it in existence? Thales Academy, our motto basically is high quality education for low cost. And we are a classical school, which means that we're working with the great books of Western civilization, which is really, really interesting. It's kind of different from a lot of the education that we have in America today. We have the Socratic method is super intertwined into what we do. And basically what that is the kids, sometimes we give them an article or an argument or an idea, and they just sit around and talk about it and come up with arguments and agree and disagree and give their input on things. So that's just one of the many things that we do in order to...
You said books of Western... What did you say?
Great books of Western civilization.
So what is a great book of Western civilization?
So for example, most of it is from like Greek, Roman, and Judeo-Christian influences, which scholars for many years have accepted as kind of the foundation of Western civilization and Western thought. And so a lot of it's Plato, Aristotle, the Aeneid, the Iliad, basically all those old books that you read and you wondered why you were reading them. So we teach them, but we also try to make them super relevant to our students.
That's awesome. And you see that there is relevance even in today's world with those things? Yeah,
I think that one thing that Thales does really well is that we acknowledge this intellectual tradition of that the classics bring to us, but also we bring it into a modern context. And we realize that, like, yes, the world is changing and the world is different, but there are some things that withstand the test of time, and they've withstood the test of time for a reason. And that's why we go back to those things to learn about humanity itself and try to form the entire human person based on history.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. Yeah. I really like that. That's really a logical way of teaching, isn't it?
It is logical.
And I think you mentioned this when we were talking before we started recording, but Thales isn't a really old school, is it? It's fairly young as far as but it's growing. Yeah. Right? So how old is it? Like, what is the history behind this school that teaches history?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. So there is a CEO named Bob Luddy who decided that the world needed more classical education. And so he's the CEO of Captive Air, which is a ventilation company for restaurants. Uh-huh. But he got really passionate about classical education, so he started opening up these academies about 10, 15 years ago. And we now have 8 campuses, and we're opening new ones up every year. They're opening up a Thales College, so it's just it's absolutely booming throughout North Carolina now, but we're starting to open up in South Carolina as well. It's really, really cool project.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And you said about 10 or 15 years ago, he kind of got passionate about it and stuff and started it. So you've been teaching for 10 or 15 years, right?
Absolutely not. I am halfway through my first year of teaching.
Right. Awesome. So another freshman, another rookie on the show, which I love to have because that kind of gives people not only the people that listen to this that are veteran teachers, it kind of gives them thoughts of like, oh, the good old days. But it also gives the people that are also in their first year of teaching people to reach out to, people to talk to, and feel free to do that. We will put in a link in the description where people can get in contact with you. And I'm also thinking about possibly making like a Facebook group of teachers that it would be for free or whatever. Like, I'm not trying to make money. I'm just trying to build a group of teachers that help other teachers, which would be really, really cool. So
definitely.
Without further ado, though, I'd love to get into this because I'm interested. When I met Brooke, it was at On the Border. We're both waiters there. And I must say, a place where it's unbelievably easy to be negative is a restaurant. Like, working at a restaurant, it is so unbelievably easy to be negative. There are so many people that you work with that are they're programmed that way. So they're some of them are very negative people in general. But that's nothing compared to who you're actually working for. Like, your customers. Like, oh, this meat is not exactly the way I want. Oh, I found a hair in it. Well, that's your hair. No, I found a hair in it. You know, like different things like that. Unbelievably easy to be negative about it. But she has always been one of the most positive people, even in those situations. She loves what she does, and she's taken that into the classroom, obviously. And so I just want to get to the bottom of this. I'm like an investigator here. So with that said, I like to start off interviews with this question. Do you have any rituals? What are you doing when Monday approaches? How do you start your Monday? How do you start your week off to set you up to be positive throughout the week?
Well, first of all, my work starts basically Sunday morning. So I spend all of Sunday preparing for my week, just getting my lesson plans together. Something that I really like is that, which is interesting, I never thought I'd enjoy this, but I have a 40-minute commute on my way to work.
Oh, yeah.
And so I have a really long drive. And so that gives me a lot of time to prepare for the day mentally at the beginning of the day, but also to decompress at the end of the day and think about what stories are funniest that I need to tell my roommate when I get home.
Yeah. Or share on the podcast.
Or share on the podcast. So I've thought about this a lot. But usually on my way to school, I pray for my students every single day. And I spend about 40 minutes praying for them, thinking about what I can do better to help them, thinking about the challenges from the day before and how I can overcome them for the next day. And then I get into my classroom and I have usually about 20 minutes to set up and mentally prepare. But honestly, nothing can usually prepare me for like when that like first student walks in, because that's when my energy just gets turned on.
Right.
And that's when I just get so hyped for the day. As soon as those sixth graders come walking down the hallway, I'm so just like happy to see them because they're wonderful. They're wonderful people.
That's so great. Like I said, she brings passion into whatever she does. So you say like you get your energy just turns on. Like, how? Like, can you get to the bottom of that? Can we delve into that a bit? Is it just like, do you feed off of their energy, or is it just like the passion just flipping, bursting out of you? How is that even a thing? And does it stay throughout the day, or are there things that push you down?
I think it's a mixture for sure about that. I do think that I feel, especially as a new teacher, and I probably won't feel like this forever, but maybe I will. I don't know. But I just feel like I have so much to give at the beginning of every day that I just like am so just like ready to take on whatever the day holds. And I don't know, I definitely have this like gung-ho, this is going to be amazing attitude. And I think that's just natural for me. That's always kind of been just that like enthusiasm for life, that carpe diem. That's Latin for seize the day. By the way, I'm a Latin teacher.
Oh yeah, I don't think I mentioned that. She is a Latin teacher. Wow, that's a great shout. The one thing that you said there that just completely changed the game, and I think this is why you are able to have that energy. I also think that's why you're such a positive person, is you said something that not a lot of teachers would say there. You said, at the beginning of the day, I feel like I have so much to give. And I feel like a lot of people, I'm not trying to point any fingers, but I feel like a lot of people go into their class and they're like, oh, how am I going to get through this day? How am I going to do this? How am I going to react to this? How am I going to, instead of thinking, well, I'm here, I have the opportunity, I can give so much to my students. I have so much experience. I'm teaching a subject that I'm literally being paid because I have more experience than them in this. I have so much to give to my students. And when you have that attitude, like, oh, I can give, it's so much easier to be positive, isn't it?
I think so.
Like, it's just so much easier because you're not focused. It's not all about you.
Yeah.
It's more about the people that you're serving, not dealing with. It's just serving. And that's not to say kids aren't challenging.
Oh, they're so challenging.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because what grade do you teach?
I teach 6th and 7th grade.
6th and 7th grade, yeah. So we're talking about students that aren't necessarily aware of who they are necessarily as people yet. They're not sturdy human beings by any means. But with that said, even looking at that little thing, you look at that and you say, oh, well, they're not sturdy. They don't know. Instead of, they're not sturdy, meaning I can help them become more sturdy. I can give something to them. With that statement, I'm glad that I made you kind of like go farther into it, because you said that, and that's just such a positive, amazing thing that I feel like you need to understand that that's so unique and that's so cool.
Thank you.
That you have that idea, but also that's where it comes from. I feel like that's just where it comes from. That's awesome. What is something, this is going to be kind of weird because I know that you're like only in your second semester of teaching. Yeah. But what is something that you are doing that maybe other teachers can look at and maybe learn from? Or the way I like to phrase this is, what is the thing that makes you as a teacher? I
think the thing that others have told me that other teachers have observed about me and complimented me on the most is just, and it sounds weird talking yourself up like this.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, but
I'm going to talk you down here in a sec with the next question. I can't wait. So it's all good.
I'm more comfortable with that. But I do think that I love being around the students, and I don't know if every teacher feels that way. Mm-hmm. So like, we have lunch. They have lunch in their classrooms, and there's a few times a week where I don't have lunch like with students. And I feel like a lot of teachers are like, oh, that's great. That's my time to recharge. If I'm in my classroom by myself, I get really sad. So a lot of times I'll just go into another classroom and then pull up a chair and eat at the table with the students because I like them so much.
Yeah.
Because I like them as people. And I think they're really interesting. And I know they're young, but they're so dynamic already and so complex and so beautiful. And so I genuinely enjoy spending quality time with my students.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen that's different, that not a lot of teachers are willing to cross that threshold from like their desk to like the student's desk and like sit down and eat with them. And I love doing that.
Yeah, and to be honest, that is really a unique thing because it's not a bad thing to take that time to recharge. I don't think that's necessarily, I mean, like, I don't think that's what you're saying. I don't think you're saying, oh, like teachers should do this. I really do think that is very unique from you because it does seem like you get a lot of your energy from your students, which is awesome, but I think it always goes back to that mindset of like, wow, I have so much to give.
Yeah.
You know, this is great. This is fantastic. But I said I was going to talk you down, so here we go.
Yep.
What is something that you have failed at? And I know there are probably a plethora of things because you're so early on in your teaching career, but what is something that you failed hard at, and and how did you react, and how are you reacting to that?
I think there are 1,000 things that I have absolutely failed at throughout my very, very brief teaching career. For context, I never did student teaching or anything, so I walked in that first day of school this year, and I had never taught in a classroom setting before in my entire life, and I was just figuring it out as I went. Because of that, I think, and this goes along, I think, with my strengths too. I think weaknesses a lot of times are like when our strengths are usually, there's like a companion to each strength, and that's like a weakness, I think.
Right.
So I think my greatest difficulty to some extent has been taking on that role of leader and as professional in the classroom because I have such an inclination to be super chill with my students.
Yeah.
And so having to take on being an authority figure, especially because I teach 6th grade, I have a little brother who's into 6th grade.
Oh, yeah.
So for me to like take on that like cool big sister role is way easier than like actually having to be an authoritarian. In understanding that the best thing I can do for my students is to push them to be the best that they can be, it's been easy to overcome that in a way that is that's focused on compassion and not like authoritarian, which I think is really important in education today.
Yeah, that's really, and once again, you come back with a positive smack there with, it's just like, here's something that I failed with, but it's also like a strength as well. You know, like it's one of those things where like you can spin it into something even more positive. But real quick, before we go to the break, I just want to kind of fill people in on how they do things at Thales, because you mentioned you had never done student teaching and stuff. So like, why is that something that happens at Thales, and why? You know what I'm saying? Like, why?
Yeah, I'm in a program called the Teaching Fellows at Thales Academy, and basically what they do is they hire young, passionate students straight out of college who are knowledgeable in a content area. And so I teach Latin. I had a minor in Latin in college, and they were actually recruiting on my college campus, which is how I got the job. But basically, they put us into the classroom as people who have this content knowledge but don't necessarily have teaching experience. And as I'm going throughout the school year, I'm taking online classes on classroom management. I'm taking online classes on humanities and all of these different things while having observations done on me, while I'm observing other teachers and taking notes on their experience. So it's very much an in-the-field experience.
Right. So it's like, it's almost like student teaching
while you're
teaching. Yeah, which is...
It's like getting paid to student teach, which is really nice, by the way.
Yeah, that's... Oh my gosh, forget you. No, I'm just kidding. I just wanted to make sure we kind of touched on that because I don't, obviously that's not the norm, I guess, in education. So I just didn't want people out there thinking like, well, this person is teaching at a school that
just dropped this girl into the classroom.
Yeah, exactly. They just like put her up the creek without a paddle. But
yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are going to go ahead, take a real quick break, thank a sponsor, and we will be right back. For you, the listeners of the Teacher Recharge podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. Now, whenever I have a guest on the show, I ask them for a recommendation for a book. So, Brooke, book, Brooke? I'm sorry. That is such a bad I am so sorry. What is your book recommendation?
My book recommendation is The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis.
Awesome. Sweet. What is that? Have you read it? Obviously.
Yes.
Yes. So what is that about? Give us a little bit of a summary.
It's basically about human nature, but it's super applicable in education because it talks about how a lot of times schools are teaching students to just regurgitate knowledge, but they don't teach them how to be a whole human person, like character education. And so I think it's a really important read for teachers for that reason.
That's fan-flipping-tastic. It's amazing. So to download your free audiobook, you can go to audibletrial.com/teacher recharge. Honestly, you can get The Abolition of Man for free. And guess what? They'll even throw in a 30-day trial period for free as well. All you got to do is go to audibletrial.com/teacher recharge. And by doing that, not only are you supporting Audible, but you're also supporting this podcast. Muchos gracias, whatever it is. I'm sorry. Thank you. That's what I'm trying to say. And we are back. We're back. We are back. We are back. That was my pretend soundboard. I'm going to work on that for next year. For next year, I'm going to get a soundboard where I can just click a button. Maybe they have one on my iPad.
I thought it was really good. I kind of liked it.
Okay.
I think maybe you should stick with the fake one. It just adds something raw and real to the podcast.
So that's thunder.
It's perfect.
That's lightning and then thunder.
I could tell.
Because you can hear lightning.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Anyways, it is my favorite time of the week, my favorite part of the show. It is, hold your ears because it's about to get cray-cray up in here. Story time! Meow! Once again with the amazing sound. I don't know what's going on.
Don't change it.
I don't know what's going on right now. Anyways, I do though. It is story time. It's my favorite part of the show. If you are new to this show, this is the part of the show where I just give my guests the floor to tell whatever story. Now, this story could be motivational, it could be sad, it could be offensive. I'm sorry. Please don't make it offensive. But it could totally be offensive. It could be funny. It could be whatever.
I'd like to keep my job.
I just give them the floor and they talk because you ain't want to hear me talk that much. So, Brooke, what is your story?
What's my story? Oh gosh. Teachers have 1,000 stories to tell at the end of every single day. But I think my favorite story has to do with my struggle with a 7th grade class. And so I have the 7th grade class who, just to give you a little background information on them, they're the highest achieving math class in their grade. They're all super smart, super good athletes, and they're all best friends. They've been going to school together forever. So they all score super high on my test. They do super well in my class, but they're all best friends, and they do this thing where they start talking and they never stop, no matter how much I yell at them, no matter how much I threaten to email their parents, no matter how much I do email their parents, give them detention, whatever. This class has just been the bane of my existence, but at the same time, it's full of my favorite students. Not that I have favorite students, but they are.
Oh, you do. Let's be honest.
But they're just they're so dynamic and so interesting and so brilliant and so funny, which is awful because they know that they can get away with it if they're funny. And so this class throughout the year, to give you a little background, when I was a first teacher, my first week of school, I go in to the classroom and I cannot get them to be quiet. So I'm on the verge of tears up in front of them, trying to teach Latin. None of them are doing anything. None of them are paying attention. They're just all talking to each other about whatever. While I'm distracted with it, trying to help another kid, one of the kids brings in his literature project to the classroom. He puts it up at the front of the classroom. And while I wasn't looking, he crawls inside of the box. And so finally I get them quiet. I go back to teaching. I'm like, this is amazing. Finally, I get to teach them something. This is great. I have no idea how to control a classroom, but this is going to be good. And I start teaching. And the kid he pops out of the box during my class right next to me and starts running around wearing a wig.
Oh,
this is
my
a
gosh.
4-foot 7th grader. And he just has so much energy. And I just thought I was going to cry because I was like, how did that even happen? Another thing this class has done is that they at the beginning of the year decided on a word. And if I were ever to by chance say a word in this class, they decided they would all scream and fall out of their chairs.
Oh my gosh.
I'm in the middle of teaching one day and I am telling them, The word, by the way, was diligent or diligence.
Oh, no.
That's the word they decided on. And so it's into my like third week of teaching. I'm like, all right, guys, I expect you to work on this diligently. The entire class, all 30 of them, scream and fall out of their chairs. And I was like, what just happened?
Oh my gosh. That is the greatest.
It's fantastic. And so this class, man, I went home every day for my first few months and was just thinking about how I can like get the best of this class every single day in a very loving way. Like I want them to succeed. So how can I like bring that energy in and put it positively?
Yeah, right.
But they actually have really, really shaped up as a class and as I've become a better teacher, and they're just wonderful to work with every single day.
That's awesome. That's so wow. Oh my gosh. First off, hats off to that class for the best thing, for the best prank ever on a new teacher. Woo. That's great. You never know what they're doing outside of when you're in front of them. So that's great. And then the other thing that I kind of took from that, it actually came at the very end of that story where you said, how can I take that energy? How can I take that craziness and push it towards something positive? Which I think is something that so many teachers these days lose. They lose that thought. And I'm saying so many teachers, like, I don't do that. I do that. All of us do it every once in a while, where we meet someone and they're being so obnoxious. You know, they're being so obnoxious, and it's so easy to look at that kid and just be annoyed and let it affect you like that. But the truth of the matter is, and I run into this with coaching soccer, is like, if a kid is talking all the time, constantly, right? And people are listening, that's the thing. If they're listening, that kid is a leader. You can't say that kid is not a leader. You know what I mean? And so we have to take that energy. We have to recognize that. And even if it's after the fact, you know what? Get annoyed if you want. But that night, you better be able to look at that and say, you know what? To be honest, that kid's a leader. How can I take that energy? How can I take the fact that all the kids in the classroom are listening to that kid? How can I have that kid on my side to where I teach him and make him into the leader I know he can be? But also, how can I make it to where he helps my class? You know?
And I actually do have an experience with that particular class, because there is one kid in that class who was such a ringleader, and for the longest time he was just the bane of my existence. Like,
right.
I felt like I was fighting this kid, constantly arguing with him every single day. But he and I ended up building a really good like student-teacher rapport, and this kid and I, and I think it's because we've gone back and forth so much, like have a absolute respect for each other, and he's so funny and so brilliant. So he like will come and talk to me now, which is awesome, and I absolutely adore this kid. But this class, I struggled with them so much. But toward the end of this last quarter, about 2 weeks out from Christmas break, he went around and he realized like how much I was struggling with like teaching this class just because of that. And he had the students sign a contract, his entire class, that they would start behaving for me. And so they all come into the classroom one day and they're being so perfect, like so good. And I was like, what cruel prank are they playing on me this time? Because they've done so much that I was like, what's going on? And they're all just smiling at me. And so I was just like, guys, what gives? Like, what are you doing? And none of them said a word. I can't get this class to be quiet for 2 seconds. And suddenly they're all being perfect and like taking notes. And I was like, there's something wrong here.
Oh my gosh.
And so I look at the kid and I was like, all right, I have a feeling you're behind this. And I go, what are the rules? And he stands up in front of his class and he goes, these brethren are the rules. He goes, number 1, we do not talk while Miss Frisch is talking. Number 2, we will take notes. We will not click our pens. We will not wrestle around. Number 3, we will focus in class and we will do our best. If you do not follow these rules, you will be shunned by the class, dishonor will be on your family, and you'll be cursed by the Fortnite gods. And he sat down. 2 weeks after that, they were so good for me. I almost cried tears of joy when that happened, because they were they just like the entire class just changed because this one kid just like decided like, and he's done this before where he stood up in class and been like, guys, we can do better. We can do better for Miss Frisch. And it's just like, I've been so overwhelmed by him using his leadership in a good way. Yeah.
Wow. That says a lot about you and about the other teachers at the facility as well, to take that and to notice that. But look at that. 3 stories for the price of 1. Fantastic. Oh, what an episode this is. With that said, we are at the end of the episode. So if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to find out more about your school, if they want to find out more about you, if they just want to follow you, where can they do that?
One place to look into our brand of classical education is www.thalesacademy.org. They have all sorts of information on the particular brand of education. And then, my school email's on there, so if you have any questions, let me know.
Me and the listeners, we appreciate you coming on. It's been a fantastic episode. You're an amazing person. And if you or anyone that you know would be good for this podcast, go ahead and email me at teacherrechargepodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. I'd also love to hear your own tips and your own stories and maybe even some things that you want to see on this show that maybe we're not doing. If you want to learn more about my own personal speaking, which I go to high schools and middle schools and speak to students about the love and success approach to leadership, you can go to fredmotivates.com. Once again, that's fredmotivates.com. And also don't forget about that free audiobook and free 30-day trial at audibletrial.com/teacherrecharge. Thanks for listening today. Thank you, Brooke, so much for a wonderful episode.
Thanks for having me.
We're almost there. We're almost at the end of the show. But first, my weekly challenge. Now, each week on Monday, I will give you a challenge to kind of take with you through the week. And I will also stick to that challenge as well. This week's challenge is all about finding that student that kind of grinds your gears a little bit, that kind of gets under your skin from time to time. And I want you to identify at least 3 positive leadership potential qualities about them, so that we can start to see the good in even the toughest of our kids. I hope you take that into the week. I hope you have a wonderful week and make a gigantic impact. Until next week, much love.